Welcome to Books vs. Movies, the podcast where I set out to answer the age-old question, is the book really always better than the movie? I'm Lluvia, an actress and book lover based out of New York City, and this week we will be talking about Noughts and Crosses by Malorie Blackman and its TV series adaptation, Noughts and Crosses. I have my first re-record today. I recorded this episode last week and I was getting ready to edit it this week, and then the sound was just it was just not good, so I have to do this again, but it's fine. So let's go ahead and get into it, because last time I recorded this, it was a really long episode, so let's see if I some of it down, because I feel like I can. But anyway, as I said, today we will be talking about Noughts and Crosses by Malorie Blackman. Now, this is a series that was first published in 2001, and it was really popular in the UK, but it never picked up here in the US. It never took off over here. I've seen a lot of kids from the UK say that Harry Potter, as well as this series, is what got them to love reading, which is always great. But yeah, I had never heard about this series until it was Dua Lipa's Book of the Month pick for her book club for July. So that's why I ended up hearing about it and reading it. And yeah, let's get started, because the reason this episode was so long when I initially recorded it is because this is about as different an adaptation you can get. It is so different. So Noughts and Crosses by Malorie Blackman, as I said, was first published in 2001, and it follows the story of Sephy, who is a cross, and Callum, who is a knot. Now, this takes place in an alternate world in which Black people, or crosses, are the ruling class, and knots, aka white people, are the minorities. So everything is reversed. The crosses, way back in history, colonized what is in our world England, and colonized Albion, which is the equivalent of England. And so the same thing, the knots were the ones that were enslaved at one point, and now they're no longer enslaved, but they still face a lot of discrimination. Basically, what Black people experience in our world is what the knots experience in this alternate world. Sephy is a cross, Callum is a knot, and it is very much inspired by Romeo and Juliet. They end up falling for each other, and it follows their forbidden romance. The TV miniseries came out back in 2020, and it follows Sephy, a cross, Callum, a knot, as they navigate their forbidden romance. So it does sound pretty faithful, but it is such a different adaptation. They are so different from each other, and it's one of those things where Malorie Blackman has said that she's very fortunate, because a lot of times when you sell the rights of your book, you have no say in what happens in terms of the adaptation. You kind of just have to hope that they bring your book to life the way you intended it to. Malorie Blackman did not have that experience, in terms of she was consulted every step of the way. She got to offer her input into the series and how it should be brought to life, and she's very aware that the adaptation had to be different to accommodate the medium in which it was being presented. So because we are going from a book to a mini-series, there had to be a lot of changes, and she was okay with that, and she was aware of them, and she gives her seal of approval. So all these changes, all these differences, Malorie Blackman was okay with. So let's get started, because there is a lot we need to cover. So first things first, Sephy and Callum never stopped being friends in the book. So Maggie, who is Callum's mom, works at the Hadley household, which is Sephy's household. And so she and Callum grew up together. Whenever Maggie would go to work, she would take Callum with her, and Sephy and Callum would play with each other. And they never stopped being friends. The series' first episode has Callum and Sephy reconnecting after many years of not seeing each other. So they grew apart, like his mom stopped taking him to work with her, they grew apart, they stopped seeing each other, there was no reason for them to communicate to each other, so they stopped seeing each other and they stopped being friends. But it was just one of those they grew apart kind of situations. It wasn't anything odd about it. So that's what happened. And yeah, so they're reuniting, they're reconnecting in the first episode, when in the book they never stop being in contact with each other, they never stop being being in each other's lives. They never stop being friends. In this series as well, which adds a bit of complication to Sephy and Callum's relationship, which I don't know how I feel about, because it is just such a trope to have like love triangle trope, but it's a trope. You know, I'm just kind of tired of that trope. But Sephy does have a boyfriend named Lacan in the series. Lacan does not exist in the book, at least not in the first book. So this series is now 9 books long. It's funny, Mallory Blackman mentioned that she meant this to be a trilogy, and then something would happen in the world and she felt compelled to write another book, to the point where now there's 9 books in the series. So I don't know if Lacan exists somewhere in the series, but at least in the first book, he does not exist. So yeah, so Sephy does not have a boyfriend in the book. She just has this boyfriend in the series. And again, we have a kind of unrequited love triangle trope. So that's a little bit different, because usually the main character has to choose between the 2 people that like them. In this case, Sephy very much, once she reconnects with Callum, she does not want to be with Lacan. The characters are also, in the miniseries, are also a lot older than they are in the books. In the books, they start, like the prologue, they're about 11 and 12, and then after the prologue, we jump forward 2 years, so they're 13 going on 14 and 14 going on 15. And then we jump forward 2 more years by the end of the book. So by the end of the book, they're about 16 and 18. But in the TV series, definitely like 17, 18 from the get-go in the TV series. So they're already much older than they are in the books. Since in this world, the Noughts are segregated, Callum in the book is one of 5 Noughts who has been chosen to integrate into Heathcroft High School, which is the high school that Sephy goes to. So he is one of 5 students chosen based on his grade point average and all of that to be one of the first Noughts students at Heathcroft High School. So it's a very big deal that he's going to this school. In the miniseries, though, his aspiration is to get into Mercy Point, which is this military academy, and so he's one of the first Noughts to integrate Mercy Point. But in the books, he's getting into Heathcroft, which is just a regular high school. In the TV series, he gets into Mercy Point, the military academy. And this is to add some more drama to the series, which I will get into. In the TV series, there is a character that does not exist in the first book, but he's the one that's the catalyst for the race wars that start occurring. And this character dies the public is led to believe that this kid has died as a result of police brutality. So there is a protest, and this is all in the miniseries, in case I haven't clarified. All of this that I'm currently talking about happens in the miniseries. So this kid dies, and he's one of Callum's close friends, and because he died, or people are led to believe he died as a result of police brutality, there is a protest outside of the hospital. It is a peaceful protest, but the cops show up to break up this protest, and Sephy shows up. She is the only cross to show up and show solidarity with the Noughts that are there protesting. And so when the cops show up, she and Callum run away, and they end up in an alley where they start to get attacked by other Noughts that are like, oh, what are you doing with this cross? She doesn't actually care about you. And they start like getting attacked by this group of Noughts. And as they're getting attacked, Sephy says, "Let go of me, you blanker." And in this world, blanker is the equivalent to the N-word. So Callum hears Sephy say that, and of course it's like this huge shock and just kind of like, I can't believe you would say that, and knowing, you know, like you would use such a discriminatory word. So that kind of ruins things, like the friendship a little bit, because obviously he's very, very hurt by that language. In the book, what leads Sephy to use that word is there's a group of crosses and their parents protesting outside the school on the first day, protesting the fact that 5 Noughts are allowed into Heathcroft. So they're protesting the Noughts acceptance, and Sephy gets out of the car and she says, you know, all of you stop it, like you're acting like a bunch of blankers. And Callum overhears, and both instances Sephy sees Callum's face and she realizes that she screwed up really, really bad by using blanker, and she does try to excuse it saying like, well, I didn't mean you, but obviously Callum educates her on the word blinker and why she shouldn't be using that language. In the TV series, the leader of the Liberation Militia, which is and it's a terrorist group that says that they're committing these acts of terrorism, you know, for the good of all Noughts, because this is what's going to get them to be treated better by the Crosses. And in the TV series, the leader of the Liberation Militia is named Jack Dorn. In the books, his name is Andrew Dorn. I'm not sure why they changed his name, but in the TV series, it's Jack. In the books, it's Andrew. And there is no indication in the books that Andrew is part of the Liberation Militia, that he is a part of the Liberation Militia, but he is working undercover for Sephy's dad. So he's infiltrated the Liberation Militia. He has quite a high ranking within the LM. So he's there to infiltrate and pass insider information on to Sephy's dad. So Sephy's mom, Yasmin, is having an affair in both the book and the TV series. So she's having an affair. It plays out a little bit differently though, because in the prologue, Maggie, again, Maggie is Callum's mom, she gets fired. And the reason she gets fired is because Kamal Hadley, Sephy's dad, shows up and is like, oh, what did you do last night? And Maggie says, oh, you know, I just did X, Y, and Z. And he's like, oh, okay. Were you hanging out with anyone in particular when you were doing that? And she sees Sephy's mom, Jasmine, like give her a look, and Maggie doesn't catch on as to what that look means. So she's like, no, it was just me. So then Kamal says thank you. He slaps Jasmine and he walks away. And when Maggie goes to check on Jasmine, Jasmine fires her on the spot. And then as she gets fired on the spot, she realizes that her mistake was not lying and saying that she realizes at that point what Jasmine was trying to communicate. So that's how she loses her job in the books. And again, this happens in the prologue, so it's like immediate. The rest of the book, she's no longer working for the Hadleys. In the TV series, she works for the Hadleys for most of the series. I want to say she worked for at least half the series until she gets fired in either the third or fourth episode. And the reason she gets fired is because, you know, she tells Kamal, like, you need to pay more attention to your wife. Like, you're neglecting her. And so she means it more as like, Jasmine's an alcoholic. So she means it more as like, stop neglecting your wife and maybe like she can start curing her alcoholism kind of situation. But Kamal just sees, he's a politician. He just sees how powerful he can be. So he goes to Jasmine and he says, you know, I know that you're cheating on me and I'm okay with that. I think it's good that you're getting your needs from someone else, since I know that I'm not the one providing them for you. And then he leaves, and then Jasmine fires Maggie because she thinks that Maggie revealed the affair to Kamal, but Kamal knew already. So that's how Maggie loses her job in the TV series versus the book. So in the TV series, Jude, who is Callum's older brother, he's pretty much radicalized from the beginning because of the way that the Noughts are treated. So there isn't really anything that makes him join or want to join the Liberation Militia or anything like that. He just wants to join them because he believes in what they're doing and he's tired of being treated like garbage. So he wants to do something about it, and he sees the Liberation Militia as a way to fix that. So in the TV series, that he's just like a rebel child who is tired of the way he's treated by the Crosses. So, but there isn't anything like outside of that. In the book, what actually causes him to start radicalizing and changing and leaning more towards the Liberation Militia is that after Maggie is fired, they can no longer afford to send him to school. So he actually has to drop out of school, and he had dreams of like continuing his education and maybe going to university. So he has to drop that. He has to give up on that dream since he can no longer go to school since there's no money for school. And so that also causes a lot of tension between him and Callum, because Callum, because of his grades and his grades really, and how smart he is, that allows him to get into Heathcroft, and Jude does not have that option anymore because he's too old. So that's kind of the main reason that he starts getting really, really radicalized in the book. So the romance between Callum and Sephy does happen a lot sooner in the TV series than it does in the book, which makes a little bit of sense, I think, or makes a lot of sense since they are older. In the books, I mean, they do crush on each other, but they are at least Sephy is very, very young. And I'm not saying that she can't want to have a boyfriend at that age. Obviously, at 13, I knew girls that had boyfriends at 13. But even then, I remember there was this one girl that I went to high school with, and she had boyfriends in middle school. And she was like, I don't even view them as real boyfriends because I was so young. Like, what even was dating in middle school? So that's kind of what I mean. Like, yeah, Sephy is definitely old enough to have a boyfriend, but she's also so young that it's like, would she, considering it all, really consider that a boyfriend, if that makes sense, if she were to look back on it at that point? So it does make sense. They are a lot older. They know more about their feelings and what they want. And yeah, so, and I mean, so it does make a lot more sense for we need to establish this relationship a lot sooner in the book in the TV series than we do in the book, since we need to root for this couple from the moment they get together until the end of the series. So it does make sense for that to happen. And yeah, in the book, it's definitely more of a slow burn. They like each other a lot, but they don't really get together until after the last 2-year time jump, which happens towards the end of the book. So in the TV series, we meet Yaro, who is Kamal's son. Yaro is half Nought, half Cross, and obviously Kamal does not. Well, in the TV series, Kamal does not claim him. I was going to say obviously Kamal does not claim him, but that's only accurate in the TV series. He did want to claim him in the book, and I will go into a little bit more detail later. But that one of the things that did annoy me about the book was that Yaro was introduced, and we actually don't know his name or anything. A mysterious brother to Sephy is introduced, and like she tries to figure out who he is, and then that plotline is kind of just dropped. And I was looking into this, and it seems like there is a mention of Yaro in one of the later books, but even then it's just like a newspaper clipping that's included in the book, but not really like it's just mentioned. But beyond that, he doesn't play a major role in the books, which I just found that really frustrating, that we get introduced to such a huge pivotal thing for Sephy and her family, and she looks into it and doesn't find anything, and then it just gets dropped. That's just really, I just found that really frustrating, because it's like, if you're gonna introduce like this son, please do something with him. But anyway, that was fixed in the TV series. Yaro does play a prominent role in the series. He comes back. Kamal tries to keep him quiet, like he tries to buy his silence, and then Yaro goes to the press and says, I am Kamal Hadley's son, and then Kamal bribes or uses his financial influence to get a hit piece written on his son, in which no one ends up believing Yaro. And so Yaro ends up leaving London, Albion, and going back to Africa. And I did say Africa, not Africa, so I just want to make that clear. So I am glad that Yaro, it does have such a prominent role in the TV series, because that was just so frustrating to me, that we find out like there's a son and then nothing happens with that information. So that was just really frustrating. But as I mentioned in the book, Kamal does try to have a relationship with his son. He wants Yaro to come live with him and his family, and Jasmine is the one that says, there's no way that this kid you had with someone else is gonna live under my roof, and there's no way that I am going to raise him. So send your kid. She's like, yeah, she sends him away essentially. And so that's one of the things that causes tension in Jasmine and Kamal's relationship in the book. In the TV series, Jasmine has no idea that Yaro exists until Maggie tells her. Sephy, Minnie, who is Sephy's sister, and Jasmine all find out that Yaro exists. And in this series only, Jasmine does know who the son is, and Sephy and Minnie end up finding out after they eavesdrop, but it's not a bombshell to the mom in the books the way it is in the series. In this series, Callum's father used to be a part of the Liberation Militia, and then he stopped agreeing with their tactics of how they were going to stop being the oppressed class. So the only reason he ends up joining is because he loses his job and the Liberation Militia pays. So he does join the LM again out of desperation, so they have some income coming in. This is, of course, after Maggie loses her job, but he does tell Jack, like, you cannot involve my son Jude. Jude at this time has joined the Liberation Militia and is a part of it, but Callum's dad says, my son is not allowed to be a part of this, and you're not allowed to use him for anything Liberation Militia related. And so obviously this pisses Jude off because he wants to be a part of the LM. But in the book, Callum's dad, Ryan, and Jude are both a part of the Liberation Militia, and Ryan has absolutely no issue with Jude being a part of the LM. Like, it's a fun father and son activity in the book for them. So yeah, in the TV series, he does try to make sure that Jude is not part of the Liberation Militia. Jasmine does try to kill herself in both the book and the miniseries, but in the book, Minnie and Sephy are the ones that find their mom after her suicide attempt, and in the TV series, it's Maggie. And one thing that I found really interesting, or a change that I found really interesting, is that in the TV series, like, Kamal is very much a present, loving father. His family might not be his priority, but he is there, and he does love his children, especially Sephy. Sephy is very clearly his favorite. And in the books, he is nothing like that. Like, he is very much an absentee, abusive father. He doesn't abuse his daughters, but he does physically abuse their mother. But otherwise he is very much an absentee father. Like, there reaches a point in which he doesn't even live with them. The only times he ends up coming home is when there's like anything political coming up in which he needs his family there to make him look like a loving, devoted dad and husband. But otherwise it's like, he's not there. He cares only about his career, and he could give two craps about his family. So I liked that change, actually, because I felt like you can still see that Kamal is a horrible person, but I felt like it added a depth to him other than just being like a bad dad and a bad husband and an even worse politician. So yeah, I liked that change, actually. So one of the reasons I think that they made Callum join Mercy Point as opposed to a regular high school is because obviously this adds tension, because not only is he one of the first Noughts students integrated into this military academy, it's also a military academy, so he's seen as a traitor by a lot of the Noughts, because he's one of the ones enforcing the rules and the laws that are oppressing them. And so at one point in the series, he and the other students there's like this festival, some sort of pagan festival that's going on ever since the death of that one kid, and the Liberation Militia kind of using his death as a catalyst to really get their acts of terrorism going even more. This puts everyone on high alert, especially since this is a pagan festival celebrated by the Noughts. So it's like, there's just a lot of like tension. They think that there might be some sort of terrorism act that occurs. Or, it's one of those things where there's going to be a lot of Noughts present, and they have to make sure that they don't get rowdy or anything. So at one point, Callum and his group, the group he's with from Mercy Point, end up getting cornered by some Noughts that are there to be like, you guys are a-holes for even being here. We're just trying to celebrate our holiday. There's no reason for you to be here. And then, of course, for the Noughts that are present there, they take that opportunity to call them traitors and harass them for being a part of the military that is enforcing this oppression. And at one point, Callum is instructed to point his gun at Jude, his own brother, because there's a high threat, according to the officers, that they are going to get attacked. Now, Lacan is Callum's military leader, and they were only supposed to put blanks in their guns, but Lacan switched Callum's blanks with actual bullets. And so Callum is pointing his gun at his brother, and he's ordered to shoot. And he does, but Callum purposefully misses, and that's when he realizes, like, oh crap, like, there was real bullets in my gun. Had I not, like, purposefully missed, I could have killed my brother right now. And so that is what leads them to quit Mercy Point. Everything that he has experienced just doesn't sit right with him. The fact that he almost killed his brother just really, really affects him. So he drops out of Mercy Point after that. What leads Callum to dropping out of Heathcroft is obviously very, very different in the books. And I will get into that when we get to one of the other differences. And that is that in the book, one of the acts of terrorism that the Liberation Militia commits is that they plant a bomb in a mall, and obviously it injures a ton of people. And in the TV series, it's a hospital that they target, and it's actually the hospital where Jasmine is after her suicide attempt. In both instances, Ryan, who's the father, takes the blame. Jude is the one that plants the bomb, but Ryan is the one that takes the blame. In the TV series, he takes the blame again because he didn't want Jude to be involved in the Liberation Militia in the first place. Jude, of course, goes behind his father's back and is like, despite what my father says, let me prove to you that I should be a part of the Liberation Militia. So Jack Dorn's like, okay, plant this bomb at this hospital. And so he does. And so Ryan, obviously not wanting his son to have been a part of the Liberation Militia in the first place, he takes the blame and says, you know, I'm the one that planted. In the book, he does still take the blame, but he does it more so because he doesn't want anything bad to happen to his son. So he tells Jude to run away and he takes the blame and he ends up in prison. And while he is in prison, Callum also ends up in trouble. Like, Callum gets accused of knowing about the bomb, which he does, but he had nothing to do with the planning of it. So what ends up happening is that Sephy invites Callum to meet her at the mall, and as he's leaving, his family's like, oh, you know, where are you going? And he's like, oh, I'm going to the mall. And Jude's like, no, like, you can't go to the mall. And he's like, what do you mean I can't go to the mall? And Jude's like, you just can't go to the mall. And he's like, oh my gosh, what did you do? And Jude's like, you know, like, nothing, just something is gonna happen soon. And Callum is like, you know, Sephy's at that mall right now. So he runs to the mall and he gets Sephy out with minutes to spare before the bomb goes off. And so he's captured on CCTV footage doing that. Government is like, well, you know, we caught you on CCTV footage leading Sephy out of the mall coincidentally before the bomb went off. So that means you know about it. And I mean, your dad was involved. So just admit that you knew about it. And he's like, no, I didn't know about it. I was just there to see Sephy and I wanted to show her something really cool. And that's what happened. But with all the controversy surrounding his dad, with all the controversy surrounding him and everything that took place surrounding this terrorist attack, Callum drops out of Heathcroft at that point because it's like, I'm not being treated well at this school and it's not going to improve now that everyone thinks that I was involved in this bomb. So there's no point in going back to school. And so that's how he ends up dropping out of Heathcroft. In the TV series, once Ryan McGregor has taken the blame for the bomb, Sephy and Jasmine team up and decide to help him and or help the McGregor family pay for the absolute best lawyer. So they're the ones that pay for the lawyer to help get Ryan acquitted. In the book, Callum thinks that Sephy paid for the lawyer, but it's actually Jasmine. Jasmine still has a soft spot for Maggie and feels incredibly guilty for firing her. So Jasmine is the one in secret to hire the best lawyer for Ryan. And in the book, Ryan does get sentenced to death. He's actually about to, he has the noose around his neck, and they're just about to pull the lever to drop the platform from underneath him when the lawyer shows up and is like, you are not sentencing this man to death. I have worked out a plea deal where he just has to stay in prison, and that's what is going to happen instead. In the TV series, he's never sentenced to death. The lawyer, it doesn't acquit him, but he is able to get Ryan to not be sentenced to death. Instead, he's sentenced to 30 years in prison. However, in the book, Ryan, in the TV series, this is seen as such a celebration as yes, only 30 years in prison. That's so merciful, and I'll might be able to get out sooner due to good behavior and all that stuff. But in the book, Ryan does not want to be in prison. He sees that as worse than death. He would much rather die because the way the prisoners are treated is awful. And so he's especially since they already think that he's the one that planted the bomb, it's you just sentenced me for an even worse death. And he does end up dying in prison. In the book, it's attributed to him trying to escape from prison, and as he was escaping, he ran into the electric fence. Of course, that's what the family is told. And so the family's not quite sure if that's the whole truth. In the TV series, he dies as well. However, one of the other prisoners beats him to death, and the guards just turned a blind eye to that. But the family is told that he committed suicide. In the TV series, after Ryan has died, Kamal ends up finding like a bank statement that shows that a lot of his money was used on Ryan McGregor. And he's like, what the hell? And so he confronts his wife and he's like, you better hope no one finds out about this, because this can really screw up my political ambitions if people even think that I had anything to do with the fact that Ryan McGregor wasn't sentenced to death. But in the book, he doesn't find out that Jasmine paid for the lawyer. One thing I did find really funny is just, it's this forbidden romance, and Callum and Sephy seem to tell almost everyone about their romance in the TV series. In the books, they don't tell anyone, that they're crushing on each other or anything like that. And yeah, in the TV series, it's just like Callum's entire family finds out or knows because Callum tells them, or they're just really bad at hiding their romance. And then Jasmine also ends up finding out. So like, it just seems like way too many people know about Callum and Sephy in the TV series. So in the book, as I said, there's a 2-year time jump that is kind of serves as the transition between the second third and the last third of the book. So what happens is that Sephy decides to go to Chivers, which is a boarding school, and she writes a note to Callum and she says, run away with me. If you want to run away with me, meet me by this time. If you don't meet me by this time, I'm going to assume that you don't want to be with me, and I'm going to head off to boarding school. And Callum reads a note too late, so he doesn't show up. So Sephy leaves to Chivers, and then we get a 2-year time jump, and she's back from Chivers. She does not go to Chivers in the TV series. She and Callum do talk about running away, but nothing actually happens until the end. But she doesn't leave for Chivers. And the reason Callum reads the note too late is because he is on his way to where the Liberation Militia told him to go. So he joins the Liberation Militia because the way he was treated at Heathcroft, that kind of radicalizes him. What happens to his father just radicalizes him even more. So he joins the Liberation Militia and he's on his way to where he's supposed to go. But in the TV series, he does join the Liberation Militia, and that's kind of what leads him to stop talking to Sephy and break up what they have going on. But yeah, he just like ghosts her. He stops talking to her and joins the Liberation Militia, and Sephy's kind of just heartbroken about that. So I guess this is like a big spoiler. So spoiler alert, but Sephy ends up pregnant. And again, because the romance happens a lot sooner in the TV series, Sephy and Callum start having sex with each other a lot sooner. So Sephy ends up pregnant at some point after they get together, and she is pregnant by the time that Callum has joined the Liberation Militia and Ryan has died. But in the book, she doesn't end up pregnant until after she is held hostage. So yes, what happens is that Callum joins the Liberation Militia, and in the book, when they find out that Sephy's back, and both of these instances are kind of to test Callum's loyalty to the Liberation Militia. So when Sephy comes back, they're like, we need to kidnap Sephy, and they're gonna hold her hostage and make some demands of Kamal before they release her, in order to release her, I guess you should say. So in the book, when she gets back from Chivers, Callum sends her a message and is like, hey, I heard you just got back, meet up with me. And then she meets up with him and she gets kidnapped. In the TV series, they're originally planning on kidnapping Jasmine, but then they remember that, or Jude remembers, it might be easier to kidnap Sephy than it is to kidnap Jasmine, because it'll be easy to lure her out because of Callum. And Callum's like, yeah, I'll lure her out. And he does, and she gets kidnapped. So while she's being held hostage in the book, she and Callum have sex for the first and only time. And that leads her to get pregnant, which I'm glad they changed this in the TV series too, if I'm being honest, because they are legitimately dating and they have feelings for each other in the TV series, and we see them, like, we see the start of their relationship and we're rooting for this relationship, and there's no reason for them to not sleep together in the TV series. In the book, it's kind of awkward because like she's being held hostage and Callum's like, I'm so sorry, like he realizes that his heart is not in the Liberation Liberation Militia after he sees Sephy being held hostage and she's crying. And he's like, this isn't the life for me. I'm sorry, Sephy. And then they have sex. And so it's kind of just like, you haven't seen each other in 2 years, especially as a teenager. A lot can happen in 2 years. And I don't know that I necessarily believe that, like, they haven't seen each other in 2 years. The first time she sees him since she gets back leads to her getting kidnapped. And then she's being held hostage. She doesn't know what's going to happen to her. And then Callum comes in and is like, I'm so sorry. And then they sleep. Like, I just don't, it doesn't make sense to me that she would sleep with him. Like, I don't see that connection still being there after being out of contact with him and him being the reason she's kidnapped in the first place. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm glad they changed that. I'm glad she was pregnant before she ended up a hostage. Like, it just makes a lot more sense because they're like legitimately dating in the TV series. And in the book, they have moments in which, like, they steal kisses, they spend a night with each other in Sephy's room, and then Callum has to leave very abruptly in the morning, obviously. But beyond that, they're not officially dating, and I don't believe that they felt anything other than like a crush for each other. And then they're reunited under these traumatizing circumstances, and that's when they realize they love each other. I don't know. But anyway, in the book, Minerva is the one that figures out that Sephy's pregnant because she shares a wall with Sephy's bathroom wall, so she hears Sephy throwing up a lot, and she's like, are you pregnant? And Sephy's like, I think so, but don't tell anyone until I figure out what I'm gonna do. And of course, Minerva does not respect that wish, and she tells her parents. And in the TV series, Maggie figures out what's going on, and then because, again, Sephy gets abruptly sick while she's over at Maggie's house. But yeah, in the book, Sephy escapes on her own. Callum helps her out a little bit when she's in the woods because they're like in a bunker in the middle of nowhere. So then Sephy escapes after she goes out to the woods, and Callum is the one that finds her, and he says, this is how you go in this direction, and then when you get to the road, turn this way and then follow that road until you hit the town. And then he says, I see her, she's running that way, and then like he leads everyone to run in the opposite direction than Sephy. So he does help her out a little bit, but Sephy ends up escaping her like holding cell after Jude comes in. Sephy starts crying after she and Callum have sex. So Jude comes in and he thinks that something non-consensual happened. And so while he's yelling at Callum for being dumb and doing that to their prisoner, Sephy escapes. But in the TV series, Sephy ends up escaping with the help of Callum and Jude. Jude attacks Jack Dorn so that Callum and Sephy can escape. And then they end very, very differently as well. But I will leave at least the ending a secret from both. But I will say the ending of the book, despite everything, really did hit me very hard. And I thought it was such a good ending, I think. But yeah, it was funny because I was watching the trailer for Noughts and Crosses on YouTube, and someone in the comments was saying, like, if you haven't read the books, don't even bother watching this because the book is better. And it was interesting, or it was funny because I was listening to an episode of The Stacks with Tracy Thomas, and the guest she had on that episode, she asked him, you know, what adaptation do you actually like better than the book? And the guest said, the book is always better. And Tracy Thomas said, I don't know about that. And she points to Black Klansman as an example. She's like, Black Klansman book was okay, and the movie was so much better because the source material was okay. So I feel like if the source material is okay, the adaptation can definitely be better because you can expand on the okayness and make something really great. But if you're working with really like a fantastic book, a near perfect book, then the adaptation is never going to live up to the greatness of that book. And I'm thinking, I like that theory, Tracy. It makes a lot of sense to me. And especially doing this podcast, I've come to realize I feel like most of my ruling has been for the adaptation versus the book. So clearly I don't think that the book is always 100% better. And I think Tracy's onto something. I think definitely if you think the source material is kind of just okay, there's a very good chance you'll prefer the adaptation. But if you love the source material, it'll probably be difficult to top that. So yeah, that was just funny because I saw that comment, and then a few days after reading that comment, I listened to the podcast, and it just led me thinking to this, because I thought the book was just okay. I'm gonna rate the book 3.5 stars. And there was just like some issues I had with the book, some of which I've touched upon here, but something that I haven't touched upon is that I felt like the first 2/3 of the book were good, and then the last third just rushed. Like, so much happened, and it happened so fast. It was kind of hard to just wrap your brain around. But then that ending, just, it's so heartbreaking, and it just, I don't know, it's such a sad ending. Oh my god. And with the TV series, what I really liked about the series is how much it expanded on the backstory of how this alternate world came to be with the colonization of Albion, and seeing how London would look with these like African touches, and seeing like the African touches to the clothing as well, to the things they wear. And I really liked that expansion. And I also really liked that they made the characters older, and we got to really dig into the relationship and really try to root for them. I rate the series 3 stars. So the winner is the book. And the book, what beats the book out for me, because the series is fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic. But what nudges the book over the edge for me is the ending. That ending. It's so sad. But yeah, you probably thought that meant that I was me leading up to the conversation with Tracy Thomas and her guests probably led you to believe something else. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mislead you, but it was just something that I was laughing about because I saw that comment and it was for the trailer for Noughts and Crosses, and then I heard the podcast episode. So it just got me thinking that Tracy has a very good point. But at the end of the day, I do recommend both. Tune in next time. I will say I don't think my episodes are going to be every week. I'm all caught up. I'm in the process of reading some more stuff for future episodes, but it's not going to be ready in time by next week. I highly doubt it'll be ready by next week. So my episodes might be a little bit more sporadic from now on, but I really hope that you stay tuned in and let me know what you think. Please, please, please leave a rating and a review and tell your friends all about this podcast. I absolutely love making this podcast, and it feels really good whenever people engage with it. So please leave it a rating, a review, and I hope that despite waiting for the next episode, that you will look forward to it just as much as I know that I'm going to look forward to it. See you next time.